Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. Queen Elizabeth's hidden testament hands power to William and Anne Charles, left reeling the Queen's last directive. How a concealed testament redefined the monarchy. The death of Queen Elizabeth II on September 8, 2022, signified the conclusive end of a significant epoch. Nonetheless, her dying desires encapsulated in a document of considerable national and personal importance ushered in a new and uncertain phase for the British royal family. Within the imposing confines of Buckingham Palace, her last will revealed a carefully devised strategy aimed not just at allocating her substantial wealth, but also at safeguarding her legacy and adeptly steering the monarchy into an uncertain future. Her unexpected distribution of invaluable personal artifacts and actions that profoundly contested royal customs left her family and the world with intricate inquiries about their roles, obligations, and the uncertain trajectory ahead. The Queen's will transcended mere legal formality. It was a confidential document embodying the significance of her 70-year reign and the destiny of the House of Windsor. The contents addressed not just financial problems or titles, but also the precarious equilibrium the royal family must navigate between revered tradition and unavoidable change now, without her guiding influence. In the mournful days subsequent to her death, when flags were hoisted to half-mast, and people gathered in mute collective grief outside royal houses, rumors over the will intensified significantly. What specifically did the Queen bequeath who would be entrusted with her most treasured things and, more crucially, her most vital responsibilities? The royal family, an institution famed for its stoicism and the principle of never complain, never explain, exhibited an extraordinary level of caution. Rumors of fervent confidential dialogues occurring behind closed doors spread among palace observers, indicating elevated tensions and heightened stakes. The public may have seen the formal reading of the Queen's will as a mere administrative procedure, yet it was in fact an event capable of altering the trajectory of the contemporary monarchy. Upon the arrival of the day, a subdued, tangible anxiety enveloped Buckingham Palace. The senior members of the royal family convened in the principal library, a magnificent and formidable chamber whose towering shelves of leather-bound volumes seemed to overshadow the solemn event. The responsibility of delivering the late Queen's last words was assigned to a pivotal player in the monarchy's future, Prince William, the recently appointed Prince of Wales. This was not only an administrative obligation for William, it was a moment of significant personal and historical significance. His grandmother's devotion and esteem for him were well recognized. He was a reliable confidant, and in several respects, a manifestation of the continuity she had diligently tried to safeguard. As he readied himself to peruse the paper, an unmistakable aura of apprehension permeated the atmosphere. As the family gathered, the room was a display of restrained emotion. King Charles III, the newly ascended monarch, had a composed and serene manner, yet the seriousness of the occasion was apparent on his countenance. Adjacent to him, Queen Consort Camilla remained vigilant and composed. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, radiated her signature grace, her demeanor contemplative and kind. Additionally, there were the younger members and the senior statesmen of the family who had withdrawn from public life. Everyone was there for a moment that would permanently change the course of their lives. A deep calm enveloped the room as William meticulously unfolded the pristine parchment, the only sound being the rustling of the substantial paper. The scenario resembled a historical play, but its ramifications were as tangible and urgent as the majestic pictures of former rulers that decorated the walls. The first lines of the will, upon being read, elicited a faint tremor across the room. Their focus extended beyond asset allocation, reflecting strategic forethought and intentional consideration. The Queen had evidently deliberated her selections with great meticulousness. Every choice and statement seemed to have a specific purpose, as if delineating a framework for the monarchy's development in a swiftly changing world. The shock started almost instantaneously. Balmoral Castle, The Queen's cherished Scottish retreat where she spent her dying days was generally expected to be inherited exclusively by King Charles. The will suggested a more intricate structure, either a trust or shared stewardship including numerous generations of the family. The ramifications of this one choice were immense. For Charles, it served as an urgent reminder that his mother's foresight beyond his own tenure. For William, it was a preliminary concrete experience of the substantial obligations that would eventually be his. The whispers in the room intensified as further information surfaced. Several of the Queen's most emblematic personal belongings of significant emotional and historical worth were designated to be bestowed to relatives not directly in the line of succession. Her choice, however unexpected, clearly reflected her profound need for family cohesion. These were not just baubles. They were historical objects imbued with significance and sentiment, and their dissemination sent a message in themselves. William's voice stayed calm as he spoke. However, his eyes revealed the gravity of the situation. For some attendees, the disclosures elicited grins of nostalgic acknowledgement. For others, the news was received with wrinkled brows and muted murmurs. In these first phases, it was clear that the Queen's will transcended mere documentation. It represented a definitive, potent exercise of leadership, a calculated strategy aimed at securing the monarchy's future by aligning it with the evolving sensibilities of a dynamic society. The ambiance in the room was imbued with expectation, and this was only the start. The discoveries to date were already disrupting the family dynamic. William hesitated, inhaling deeply before exploring the will's details further. The occurrences of that day would not only influence the family's imminent destiny, but also compel a deep reflection on their position in the world. A framework for the future properties, wealth, and an innovative royal doctrine. As William read each word, the ambiance in the library seemed to become more oppressive. The Queen's will emerged as more than a mere inventory of bequests. It was a meticulously crafted tapestry of her ambitions for the future of the institution she had dedicated her life to. In several respects, it was a strategic document, its foresight and the seriousness of its decisions astonishing even those who considered themselves most familiar with her. One of the earliest and most consequential disclosures pertained to the Grand Royal Estate's assets, infused with profound personal and historical significance. Balmoral Castle served not just as a royal house, but as a private refuge, the sole location where the Queen could relinquish the pressures of her public duties and enjoy invaluable unmonitored moments with her family. However, when William's speech resonated in the hushed assembly, it became evident that the long-standing belief in a straightforward succession to King Charles was erroneous. The will delineated a more complex strategy proposing a collective obligation among many family members, perhaps via a trust. Dr. Alistair Finch, a royal historian, said in a subsequent examination, this was an exceptionally radical move. Traditionally, these exclusive estates go straight from one king to another. Through the establishment of a shared model, the Queen was essentially decentralizing a portion of the monarch's personal authority. It indicates a transition from a solitary hierarchical framework to a more collaborative quasi-corporate familial form. This decision was both a pragmatic move intended to safeguard the estate for future generations and a significant symbolic gesture. It immediately elicited inquiries. Was it an act of inclusion or a deliberate tactic to protect the estate's legacy from the possible caprices or financial strains of a single rule? A comparable strategic uncertainty enveloped Sandringham House. The royal family's Christmas festivities at the renowned Norfolk estate are fundamental to both public and private customs. Here, the Queen's will indicated a break from tradition. It seemed that Sandringham may not automatically go to the subsequent monarch in the customary fashion, but may instead be allocated for an alternative function within the family's future holdings. The details were obscured by legal terminology, although the ramifications were significant. These were not only residences and parcels of land, they were emblems of continuity, serving as anchor points for the monarchy's history and future. Modifying their stewardship would fundamentally change the practical and emotional essence of the royal family's existence. As William proceeded, attention turned to the Queen's substantial financial legacy. For decades, the actual magnitude of her personal fortune has been a topic of fervent public and media conjecture. Although the Crown Estate and the Duchy of Lancaster were recognized sources of royal revenue, her private wealth, a substantial amount discreetly accumulated via astute investments, private collections, and judicious financial stewardship, remained enigmatic. For the first time, the whole extent of her personal financial status was becoming evident to her heirs. However, it was not the magnitude of the riches that astonished the family. Rather, it was the method of its allocation. The Queen's will exhibited a careful consideration for equilibrium, ensuring her fortune was distributed in a manner that mirrored her dedication to both tradition and modernity. Specific family members were designated to receive shares in her private financial account, while others were assigned the custodianship of her personal art collection. The rationale for these selections was clear. The Queen aimed for her legacy to persist, not just via her progeny, but also through the safeguarding of history and culture. The art collection notably became a focal point of vigorous discourse inside the room. It included masterpieces by painters like Rembrandt and Vermeer, which were not part of the official royal collection entrusted to the country, but had been privately collected throughout time. The will delineated the family members designated to inherit these invaluable things, and the selections were unexpected. Instead of unifying them under the new monarch, the Queen appointed persons she deemed capable of valuing their historical importance and safeguarding their preservation. A person familiar with the royal household said, "This was a masterstroke of cultural diplomacy within her family." She was bequeathing a portion of her personal legacy to individuals she believed possessed a sincere enthusiasm for the arts, irrespective of their status in the line of succession. The choice reflected her ideals and her comprehension that the monarchy's function in the 21st century encompasses both cultural patronage and constitutional obligation. The discourse on the Queen's personal jewels was perhaps the most emotionally charged aspect of the reading. Her assemblage of exquisite tiaras, necklaces, and brooches has captivated the public for decades. These were not just embellishments. They were heirlooms, each possessing a narrative spanning centuries. The Vladimir tiara, with its dramatic history linked to the collapse of the Russian Empire, is as famous as the gemstones it contains. Who would be the beneficiary of such legendary artifacts? The solution proved to be as intricate as the history of the diamonds themselves. A substantial collection of essential items was entrusted to Catherine, Princess of Wales, a clear and intentional action to prepare her for her prospective position as Queen Consort. Conversely, some objects were bequeathed to relatives not in the direct line of succession, a choice that elicited skepticism and murmured conjecture. These decisions, however uncommon, emphasized the Queen's intention to preserve harmony and cohesion within the family. It was not just about the individuals adorned with the diamonds, but rather about their symbolic significance, a communal past, and a shared obligation. Despite William's cool manner, the gravity of his comments was evident. He saw that each disclosure had ramifications not only for the people concerned, but for the monarchy in its whole. The Queen's will emerged as a reflection of both continuity and transformation, a nuanced balance that reflected her deep comprehension of the problems the family would encounter in the future. As the reading advanced, the atmosphere in the room transformed. The original fascination was now intertwined with an escalating feeling of worry. Every new detail seemed to unveil another facet of the Queen's approach, providing insight into her inner thoughts and goals. For some, these disclosures provided solace and affirmation. For others, they incited a subtle identity crisis, compelling them to reevaluate their position within the family and the future of the institution itself. As William halted to regain his breath, it became evident that the will was only starting to reveal its secrets. The Queen's vision was coalescing, offering clarity in some aspects, while remaining ambiguous in others. The family members shared somber, understanding looks, well aware of the significance of the next hours. This was not only the bequest of a heritage, it was the bequest of responsibility, and the delicate boundary between tradition and development had never seemed more tenuous. Historical heirlooms, the significance of personal artifacts. As the afternoon light illuminated the principal library, the gravity of the Queen's remarks seemed to envelop the space. As additional details emerged, the distinction between tradition and evolution became more indistinct. For the royal family, these were not only directives, they were a blueprint for their future, crafted by the sagacity and prescience of a king who had seen the world transform in ways they could not conceive. The emphasis of the will has now shifted to the very personal matters that characterized the Queen's life. Included were her invaluable personal artifacts, each imbued with its own story and significance. These items were more than just belongings. They served as concrete connections to a British heritage that spans millennia. As William continued reading, it became clear that the distribution of these objects was decidedly non-arbitrary. The Queen's choices were profoundly significant, reflecting her personal connections, ideals, and aspirations for the monarchy. This segment of the will focused on the Queen's collection of personal jewels, which was allocated with both symbolic and emotional significance. The list included tiaras used at state banquets and brooches that had become emblematic of her public identity. Prominent among them was the Queen's esteemed favorite, the Vladimir tiara, an artifact of significant historical importance. Its financial worth was described as extraordinary, although its genuine significance resided in its association with her identity as a ruler and as a lady of considerable historical insight. The inquiry on everyone's mind was, who would be assigned such a powerful emblem? The response was not as simple as many had expected. As anticipated, certain significant items were allocated to Catherine, the Princess of Wales, thus affirming her position as the future Queen Consort. However, some were entrusted to relatives outside the main line of succession, a decision that seems intended to bolster the Queen's aspiration for a cohesive and unified family. Each distribution seemed to be a calculated effort in legacy management intended to maintain the significance of these things and ensure they continued to serve as powerful symbols of continuity and tradition. In addition to the jewels, the Queen's own art collection acquired even greater importance. This collection accumulated over decades, including paintings by artists like as Rembrandt and Vermeer, appreciated privately inside royal confines, but never shown by the public. These items were not official crown property. They were personal buys, stemming from a sincere admiration for beauty and a profound awareness for history. The will disclosed that these valuables were not to be just assimilated into the family vaults. Instead, they were to be handed to designated family members who had shown a recognized affinity for art and culture. This decision astonished many since it deviated from the customary practice of concentrating such assets under the sovereign monarch. The Queen seemed to possess an alternative viewpoint. She opted to disperse these treasures, guaranteeing their cultural and historical significance would be recognized by future generations in a more widespread way. It demonstrated her comprehension of the monarchy's changing function in contemporary society, a function in which these artifacts were not just relics of history, but dynamic contributors to the formation of a cultural future, a legacy that beyond the confines of Buckingham Palace. Nevertheless, despite the emergence of these disclosures, the ambiance in the room was decidedly non-celebratory. A tangible tension permeated the proceedings, a shared recognition of the potential for these choices to incite conflict. Some family members accepted their inheritances with subdued appreciation, while others shared apprehensive looks, their faces reflecting a mix of astonishment and unease. For them, the will was not only a collection of directives, it was a manifestation of the Queen's assessment of their status within the fluctuating royal hierarchy. A particularly heartbreaking moment arose with the reference to smaller, more intimate artifacts, personal letters, private pictures, and treasured souvenirs. These goods have an emotional significance that well beyond any financial value. They were remnants of the Queen's personal existence, an aspect of her that few even within her inner circle had ever comprehensively seen. Their distribution served as a reminder that prior to her reign as queen, she was a mother-grandmother and great-grandmother whose affection for her family was often shown via subtle, intimate actions. William's voice became gentler as he recited these excerpts, cognizant of their emotional resonance. For the younger generation, these legacies served as a means to intimately engage with her life and principles. For those acquainted with her for decades, they served as a poignant reminder of a relationship that was both very public and deeply intimate. As the family comprehended the importance of these actions, the room seemed to suspend its breath. The silence was articulate, but like every disclosure in the will, these profoundly intimate legacies have a public aspect. Speculation emerged among the family over the ramifications of these decisions, who had received preferential treatment, who had been neglected, and what implicit signals were included in the Queen's last directives. In her endeavor to promote unity, the distinctions between tradition, feeling, and strategy seemed to be more obscured. As twilight descended and the reading persisted, the Queen's perception sharpened. It represented equilibrium, striving to harmonize historical significance with the imperatives of advancement, guaranteeing her legacy would endure not alone via her descendants, but also through the principles and customs she had advocated. However, when William investigated more, it became evident that this was no conventional inheritance. The Queen's last act of leadership was intricate and varied, and its consequences would resonate for centuries both inside the family and throughout the monarchy. The Sussex inquiry and the disintegration of a family, the ambiance in the room changed again as the will delved into more intimate matters, addressing the intricate dynamics of familial ties and the inheritances bestowed onto children and grandchildren. One of the most eagerly awaited disclosures pertained to Prince Harry. For years, his choice to withdraw from his royal responsibilities and the life to which he was born has had repercussions that extended far beyond the palace confines. Speculation over the Queen's connection with Harry has been pervasive, and her will now provides a rare posthumous glimpse into her sentiments about her grandson and his role in the family's destiny. A deep silence enveloped the room as Harry's name was announced. His bequest, albeit not substantial in financial terms, relative to others was imbued with profound symbolic significance. He inherited a singular notable item, a ceremonial sword from the reign of King George V, a family relic symbolizing service, strength, and tenacity. The sword was not only an item, it was a clear and heartfelt reflection of Harry's military service and his commitment to the causes he supported. This may also be seen as a nuanced acknowledgement of the psychological conflicts he had in harmonizing his identity as a prince with his own sense of self. For Harry, the gesture was both an honor and a poignant reminder. The sword symbolized tradition and respect, but it also underscored the separation between him and the institution that had significantly influenced his life. Certain family members saw the present as an olive branch, a conclusive effort by the Queen to recognize his contributions and his significance in the family's history. Others, however, saw it with a more skeptical perspective. Was it a symbol of peace, or a stark reminder of the responsibilities he had abandoned? The uncertainty lingered, mirroring the ongoing conflicts between Harry and his family. The diverse responses to this singular bequest revealed the profound emotional divisions within the House of Windsor. For William, it was an additional significant strain to manage his relationship with his brother while fulfilling the monarchy's expectations. For King Charles, it was a tribute to his mother's persistent desire for familial cohesion, despite the increasing fissures in its basis over the years. For Harry, it was a time of significant contemplation, one that would surely influence the trajectory of his post-royal existence. The Queen's will was not just about healing. It also represented a candid recognition of the divisions that inevitably arise in a family of significant public prominence. As further information emerged, it became evident that several family members had received far less than they had expected. Rumors started to spread about the possible effects on family connections. Individuals who inherited significant assets, relics, or objects from the monarchy's history faced rigorous examination, while others who saw themselves as marginalized contended with sentiments of disillusionment and isolation. William, who had previously read the will with notable poise and control, started to exhibit the strain of the document's emotional impact. This document, beyond a mere account of his grandmother's last desires, it served as a reflection of the intricate dynamics inside a family tethered by obligation, but divided by conflicting interests and individual aspirations. These disclosures impacted him not just as a grandchild, but also as the future monarch responsible for addressing the repercussions of these choices. The Queen's decisions were clearly influenced by external factors. Her will was not only a legal document, it was a meticulously constructed narrative aimed at safeguarding the monarchy while reinforcing the relationships she valued most. However, this tactic simultaneously revealed the family's divides. Long-standing tensions exacerbated by the will's disclosures were on the verge of erupting. In the midst of these currents of change and possible conflict, Catherine, Princess of Wales, emerged as a symbol of stabilizing continuity. Her inheritance, including iconic jewels and personal belongings, highlighted her increasing status within the family and affirmed her trajectory as the future queen consort. As William's consort, she had already emerged as a crucial influence in molding the next generation of the monarchy. The Queen's actions unequivocally demonstrated confidence, delegating to Catherine the responsibility of advancing her legacy with dignity and elegance. However, this act was not without of difficulties. Catherine's significant position accentuated the differences within the family, further emphasizing the inequitable distribution of the Queen's fortune. When attention shifted back to William, his already substantial position within the monarchy seemed to have been amplified tenfold. The will explicitly stated that William was not just the heir apparent, but also the cornerstone of the family's future. His inheritance included not just goods, but also the significant obligation to preserve the monarchy's principles while navigating unfamiliar waters. Property's relics and symbolic gestures all indicated his crucial role in safeguarding the monarchy at a period of unparalleled transformation. As the evening progressed, it became apparent that the Queen's last act of leadership had achieved one critical objective. It forced her family to examine their roles, duties, and interpersonal connections. It was uncertain if her decisions would eventually reconcile them or exacerbate their tensions. For William, this represented both an obligation and a vocation, an opportunity to fulfill his grandmother's goal while establishing his own trajectory as a future monarch. However, the Queen's will had not yet revealed all its mysteries. Every additional phrase jeopardized